Pass over
Unmuted.
to you, Janelle.
Okay, thanks Kate and Christine for joining us today. We're going to be talking all about end of year for Sage CRE. We haven't heard either of you speak, so we're sort of questioning perhaps if you haven't got microphones or anything. But if you have questions, just type them into your chat box and Jacinda will either interrupt me or we'll do them at the end. Just to be clear, what we're not talking about today is payroll or STP. That's in another webinar, which I think is next week. If you haven't been notified about that one and you want to be, just send in an email to help@thrivetech.com.au or pop it in your chat box during this meeting and Jacinda will make sure you get onto the mailing list. Okay, so the biggest part, and I'm working on, what's on my screen now is Sage version 18. So if you've since upgraded to a version greater than 18 in your colours or your screen looks a bit different to what I've got here, don't panic. It just is presentation. The end of year functions have not changed at all in any of the modules. Okay, so the hardest one with your end of year, and this is where we get the most queries, is the general ledger. So that's where we're going to jump in today. You can either use the tree format from your Windows selection there, or anyone who's worked with me before knows that I'm an old-fashioned user. So I always launch the whole module. Either way, there's no correct answer. I'm assuming we're going to work on the philosophy today that everyone's on a June 30 year end. And of course, you must be in June to do your year end. If you're still in May, you need to close your current period first and then do your year end. So if you're in June and you're ready to close off and roll over to the next year, you go here, you just go down and you go close fiscal year. You always get this question which it says, have you backed up your master file? And by the way, it's best to do this when there's no other users logged into your system. So either last thing at night or first thing in the morning, anything like that. You can safely say yes to this. I've been a consultant now for what feels like 200 years. And I've never experienced this end of year process going wrong, you know, bombing out or abort, nothing. Never ever had that happen. So I always safely say yes. You know, for example, last night's backup, you know, every system should be doing a nightly backup and last night's backup would be good enough. Okay, so if you've got, in my sample data, we've got multiple companies, which is why I now have this list in front of me. You may not have multiple companies, so you'll just have one company on this list, and that will depend on your individual setups. So today I'm going to roll over Timberline Construction Company 01, and it tells me where my fiscal and ending dates are and where my current period end is. So you just say okay to the company that you want to use. And this, you may not get this message, but it is a common one. And it says prior year adjustments have been found. Prior year will be closed. Close the fiscal year will have to be run again to close the current year. So what that's basically saying is you've got entries for last financial year that need to be re-rolled before you can close and roll over this financial year. Okay, so I'm just going to interrupt my conversation there for a minute. So what the end of year process actually does is it picks, amongst a couple of other things that I'll talk about later, but the fundamental thing it does is it closes out all your profit and loss accounts and gets their closing balance and moves that up to your retained earnings account. That's the fundamental thing that the end of year does. So what this message is saying is that there's been transactions post to last financial year that impact a profit and loss account. Therefore, they have to be picked up and moved to retained earnings for last year before you can do this year. Okay, hopefully that makes sense to everyone. So if I just, and there's no way around this message, you don't really have much choice other than to say, okay. And that's telling me that there was $1,000 worth of entries for last financial year that are going to be re-rolled. And of course, this is your default retained earnings account as set up in your general ledger settings. Type something into the chat box if that's something you want us to go through today, where that account defaults from. So there would be very few exceptions why you would want to change this account. So you just accept what you're doing there and the system does its thing. Like everything, it prints an audit trail, which we flick off to a print file, and there you go. That is re-rolling last financial year because it found errors there. If I look at my tasks menu, I can see now completed normally. If I go in and close the fiscal year again, we get the backup and we say yes to that. And now it's ready to close this financial year. Okay, but there are no entries in the sample data, but your amount that's going to come up in this column is basically going to be your net income or the net result of your profit and loss for the year. So you just accept that. And this is one of the other things that the end of year process does. It creates your next year's calendar. And there's all your dates for next financial year. And you just say, I mean, why you'd want to change a calendar, I don't know, but you generally accept that. And again, it'll print an audit trail to the file, to a print file, and you just say start. And you can see in the background tasks running through, closing all those profit and loss accounts, moving them up to retained earnings, creating the calendar. And the last thing your end of year process does is if we just sneak in to have a look at an account here, it can be any account in the general ledger, but it moves all these, so balance 1 year ago, end balance 1 year ago, 2 years ago, all these fields here just roll forward 1 year. So that's the third thing the end of year is doing. Okay, so that's basically it. Close fiscal year. The GL will force you to repost anything to last fiscal year if you've got it, and then you do it again to process this year. And then that will create the new calendar and your general ledger will be in July. Okay, and you can start processing. If for any reason you want to post transactions, you know, for example, you might close off now and keep processing, but in September or October, your accountant may come back to you and give you a list of journals that need to be posted to last financial year. That's fine. Go ahead and post them and date them the 30th of June 2022, which will be last financial year, and then just close your fiscal year again. So every time you post something to last financial year, you need to close the fiscal year or do the rollover. That's just a change in terminology. When we say rollover or close fiscal year, it's one in the same thing. Does that make sense? So every time you post something to last fiscal year, you need to do the rollover again. It is not uncommon at all to see clients do the GL close fiscal year multiple or many times. Some of the larger clients might do it 10 or 15 times, and there is absolutely no harm in doing that. All you're doing in the background is constantly picking up those profit and loss accounts, closing them out and moving it up to retained earnings. If there's any questions about where we're at now before we move on to the other modules, now's a good time to type it into your chat box. I guess in a lot of ways, when I see clients only roll over the fiscal year once, I find that more suspicious than if they roll it over 15 times. And that's just an operational thing. But it doesn't stop you going back and posting to last financial year. Okay, so if everyone's good with the general ledger, because that's the big one, we'll move on. So all your other modules will need closing as well, and they're all relatively straightforward. I'm going to jump into job cost now, because that's the other main one that we do. And again, if we just come down to tasks, and again, this will vary on everyone's system will be different depending on how your job cost was set up. But technically there isn't actually a closed year in job cost, but there is a closed month. And the system knows where your end of year is set up. So it knows that if you close the month and it's June, you really are closing the year. Okay, so it's just a bit slow today. So you just come in and there you go. It's picking up all your current month's date. Obviously I'm on sample data, so just ignore the new ones there. If I roll over, it's going to tell me what the new month is. And you just click start and run through. It really is that simple. The problem most people run into with job cost is in job cost, you can post backward to any date, but when you start, if you forget to do the month rollover, job cost doesn't accept transactions posted forward because the month rollover hasn't been done. The dates don't physically exist in the module. So that's where most people get into strife. They say, gosh, you know, why isn't this posting? It's like, well, you're trying to post something to August 2022, but that date, that month doesn't physically exist in the calendar. Okay, so that's job cost. Accounts payable. So again, in your tasks, you've got close year and close taxable payments year. We're not talking about taxable payments year today. Again, that's another webinar that I think's run in about 3 weeks. And if you haven't done your TPAR reporting before, again, just put something in the chat box or send an email in to help@thrivetech.com.au to get on the mailing list to attend that webinar.
Yeah, I think it's the second week of August. We've got that one scheduled, Janelle.
Okay, yeah, I think I'm hosting that one too.
You are.
So your TPAR, yeah, lucky I like talking. So your TPAR, your taxable payments and your end of year are two very separate processes. So if we just jump into your normal end of year, and all that's saying is my current year is 2015. If I roll over, it will roll into 2016. You just say, yes, have you backed it up? Yes, again, not one I've ever seen go wrong. If you forget to do the AP rollover, is it the end of the world? No, not really. It just impacts a few of your aging reports, and then there's a few desktop home pages that perhaps won't show the aging correctly if you don't roll that over. I've seen clients that have forgotten to do that for 5 years at a time, and it hasn't been a big impact. The TPAR end of year, that's a different story if you don't roll it over. And again, we'll talk about that in the separate webinar. Again, accounts receivable is the same. You've got tasks and close year. Again, I've seen many clients forget to do this for years on end. Doesn't have a huge impact. Some of your reports might just go skewy. Just press the start button. It really is that easy. Just rolls, you know, brings all those last year numbers into this year and that type of thing. Address book, there is no end of year. Billing, there is no end of year. Cash management, and it's a bit like AR and AP. There's nothing spectacular in there. It's telling you what your existing year is, what your next year will be. You always say, yes, I've done a backup, because last night's backup that happens on your system automatically would be good enough. Contracts, okay, one of those funny modules that doesn't really let you use the tree method of exploring to it. So we'll launch the whole module. And under tasks, there's only a close month. There is no close year in contracts. So you just close the month and the system automatically knows when the end of year kicks in. So you just make sure you agree with the current month and the new month and then start the process. Okay, contracts is a bit like job costs in that you're only rolling over the month. The system's smart enough to know which month is the end of year. Like job cost in contracts, you can date-wise, you can always post backwards. But again, if you forget to roll over the end of month and you try to post forward in contracts, your transactions won't post because the date doesn't physically exist in the system. So that's just the one to watch out for there. Equipment costs, which there's not a lot of clients got, but again, it is the same as job costs. There's a month that you need to close and the system will know that that is an end of year as well. Estimating, well, look, we all know estimators are just different, so we don't even want to talk about them today. General ledger we've done. Inventory, we're not talking about, we did job cost. Payroll is in the next webinar, which is, hopefully Jacinda can look up the date for us.
It's next Wednesday.
And that's going to be by Pam.
Correct.
And if I'm not mistaken, Jacinda, she's going to talk about the payroll end of year and STP2.
Definitely payroll end of year. I'm sure she'll touch on STP2.
P2.
Yeah.
Okay. There's no end of year in project management. Property management, I don't think anyone that's linked in today runs property management. And there's only a few clients out there that run that. So we'd rather do that as a one-on-one for that. And that pretty well covers it. I think the people that linked in today don't run equipment maintenance either. So that covers all your modules. You don't have to physically wait until, you know, a particular date to roll over your general ledger. You can do that at any time you want. You could do it if you want to. If you're starting to get July transactions now, nothing to stop you rolling over GL right now. Okay. So that pretty well covers everything I wanted to talk about today. If there's any questions, I'll just do a quick recap. So in general ledger, you're going to do a closed fiscal year. You're going to watch out for transactions for last year that have to be rolled over first. And if that's the case, then you're going to close the fiscal year a second time to capture this year. The only other one to watch out for is accounts payable, and make sure that you're quite clear on your end of year versus your taxable payments end of year. Again, taxable payments is a separate webinar, so I'll just let these road workers go by if anyone's getting some background noise. But all your other modules are very straightforward in that you just close the year or you close your month. Have we had any questions come in, Jacinda?
No questions.
Okay, this might be a record for me because normally I go over time.
Yes, exactly.
And today I've managed to get it all in record time. If there's anything anyone wants me to recap or I went too fast or
just pop it in the chat.
You're having trouble hearing me because of the roadwork crew outside my window, now's the time to let us know. I noticed someone come in a little bit late into today's session, so you missed the first bit. If you just send in a ticket to help@thrivetech.com.au and say, hi, Jacinda, can you please send me a recording of today's end of year process? Jacinda will send you a link so you can watch the recording.
Definitely.
Okay, anything I've missed, Jacinda?
No, you've covered it all very clearly in my mind. Thank you, Janelle. Isn't
it amazing how long I can talk for without drawing breath?
Yes. Scott says thank you as well. Thank you, Scott. Thanks for attending.
Yeah, so any questions at all, send it into our help desk, or if you just want the recording, send that in. This is the first year that we're not actually sending out all the PDF written document. We used to always send out pages of instructions, and we made the decision not to send it out this year because it's all just a bit repetitive. Nothing has changed. So if you do have any questions or you're not sure, just send it into the help desk. Otherwise, back to you, Jacinda. I'll let you wrap it up.
Thank you, Janelle, and thank you to those people that attended. And as Janelle said, send in a ticket if you need any help at all over the year-end period as you're working your way through. Thank you all for attending.
Thanks. Bye.